I was with the William Morris office, and they called me one day and said, we'd like you to do a television series for Patty Duke. In those days, if you worked in pictures, you didn't do television. In fact, there was such a dichotomy that the studios would not allow their stars to be photographed on television going into a theater for a premiere. They didn't want their stars to appear on television because it was something that was going to go away soon. So if you worked in pictures, you were many cuts above those poor fellows who had to work in television. So when they asked me if I'd do a show for Patty Duke, I said, no, I didn't do television. And they said, well, would you meet Patty? And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. So we had a date at the Brown Derby, which no longer exists. And the situation was, they had a show called the Patty Duke Show. They had a time slot. They had a network. They were all set. And I said to my agent, who was Sam Weisbord, who later ran William Morris, I said, what do you need me for? You've got it all. And he said, well, we don't have one thing. And I said, what's that? And he said, a show. We don't know what it's about. So I said, well, I can't do it. He said, well, meet with Patty. So I did. There were half a dozen William Morris agents at the booth. Patty sat next to me. She held my hand the whole time. She was hungry for love. She had had a terrible, terrible childhood. She was then about 12 or 13 years old. She had done The Miracle Worker. And I fell in love with her. At the end of that lunch, I said, I'm going to write a show for her. I took her home with me to my wife, Georgia, and we had dinner. And while we're having dinner, I realized Patty's gone. She's in the kitchen doing the dishes. She was wonderful. Anyway, she was kind of our daughter. So I created the Patty Duke Show.
Where did you get the idea for that?
It came from Patty's talent. She was so wonderful in The Miracle Worker that I thought she could do two parts. I mean, one part wouldn't capture it all. So what I did was to write two parts so that one was very kind of English and the other was very hip, so you'd know from the dialogue who was who. When I saw the first show, I realized I didn't have to do that. Patty was so talented. The minute she came on the screen, you knew whether she was Kathy or Patty. So we had three years of that. But a few months after the show started, oh, and by the way, someone from the network kept coming up to me saying, I read your script. It's terrible. It'll never work. He kept putting it down. And the day we recorded the music, Sid Raymond wrote it. And it was wonderful. And this man from the network came up and he said to Sid, that's the best thing about this show. I love your music. Nothing else is going to work. I called the network and had him fired. He was just being destructive. My idea was twins. Bill Asher, who directed it, said, let's make them cousins. So I said, okay. And I think he put his name on as a creator because he thought of cousins instead of twins. So his name is on, but I wrote the show, and the idea was mine. When the producing company, which was United Artists, called me in to make a deal.
Dick Dorso, right? Was he
Dick
there?
Dorso, yes. Mm-hmm. They called me in to make a deal. I said to them, the only way I will agree is if I write all the scripts. I don't want anyone coming in and destroying the show. What I didn't know was that in the history of television, no one person had ever written all the scripts for a weekly series comedy show. But they were so eager to have me, they said, fine. I signed a contract, and I later learned that same afternoon, they had gone out and hired two other writers to write scripts without telling me. So that when I came to them and said, I don't have a script for next week, they'd say, here, we never use those scripts.